Hello, and welcome to Her Next Step, the podcast where women in the public service talk about how their passion and their intuition led them to interesting and exciting career paths. We'll hear about the fears and challenges that could have held them back, and about the internal and external supports that enabled them to take their next step. I'm Lily Murphy, and I'm speaking to women whose stories will, I believe, inspire you to wonder what stepping stones would help you to take your next step. My guest on the show is Dr. Idel McSharry. Edel has many passions, amongst them the desire to continually improve nurse education and to impact the future of health service delivery. Idel's career path has taken her from general to critical care nurse to nurse tutor, lecturer, programme director on the undergraduate and postgraduate healthcare programmes, most recently head of school in nursing, health science and disability studies, with a recent period of acting president of St. Angela's College. Pursuing the move from practitioner to lecturer to senior management has challenged Idel personally and professionally. And today we'll explore how she overcame those challenges and what enabled her to continually look for and take her next step. So, Dr. Idel McSharry, you're welcome to Her Next Step podcast. I'd love to start by asking you a question. If I stood in front of your peer group in your national school and then in your secondary school and also in front of your family when you were younger and said, somebody you know is going to become a doctor of education, will lead up the School of Nursing and Health Sciences and Disability in St. Angela's College and will become the acting president of St. Angela's College, would they have automatically looked in your direction?
Oh, absolutely not. No. When I was in primary school, I was unable to write or spell. My sister, who was 3 years younger than me, was invited into the classroom from junior infants when I was in first class to correct my spelling. So, and I was a generally happy child, funny enough, because I had a fabulous family at home where my mother would tell me I was well able, actually. But then at around the age of 10, I was diagnosed, well, informally, by a nun who returned from America as having dyslexia. Now, it was a complete unknown at that time what dyslexia even was. And when she told my mum that I had dyslexia, my mum was like, not really believing in that because she didn't know about it. And there was nothing to be done with it and nothing ever was done with it. But for me, it was a really wonderful thing to know that I didn't even know what dyslexia was. I just knew there was something why I couldn't learn to spell. I'd learn and then it'd be gone. Then I'd learn again and it'd be gone. And I'd have great ideas in my head. And how they found out I had it was by writing a whole thing in religion. And I thought it was brilliant when I was finished because I had all these ideas. But obviously no one could read it after me, nor could I. So... But the things were still in my head, and that's where the nun saw, because I was actually good at maths and I was able to answer her well and everything. So I suppose no is the answer, because obviously I was not excelling at school. I didn't excel then in secondary school, but there was a little bit of me knew I needed to work really hard to get my thoughts on paper. I could understand everything that was going on. I had opinions about everything. I was very poor at language, in fairness. But no, it was a struggle through. I did exceptionally well, considering that. I got a scholarship to a boarding school one time. One teacher took me aside with the little red book when I moved schools to a small country school. My father, funny enough, said, and some nun said she had a thing called dyslexia. So he decided that he'd crack that one, and he got a red spelling book, and he used to he used to go through these spellings. It was a real chore. And that might have helped the rote learning piece on that. But it certainly gave me the message, you'll get nowhere unless you really work really hard here. And you are behind everybody else, and you need to, in order to succeed, this is what you need to do. So I think there was an awful lot of self-motivation there in terms of that. I do think my mother was this blind belief, I don't know where she got it from, was, no, they're all wrong. Every result was wrong. Everything was wrong. You were actually well able. And I think it was maybe the way I answered up, as she'd say herself, around the dinner table. We had lots of debates in our house around the dinner table. So there was a belief at home, but still they wouldn't have thought I would take that career trajectory. They wouldn't want to see, they could see them results weren't in line with somebody going to have a doctorate in education, let alone go to university or any of that. They saw I was a capable, able, intelligent person, but they wouldn't have seen that as the career trajectory, no.
Oh, interesting. So then what was it that brought you into nursing? What interested you?
Well, I think at the age of 10, I had my appendix out, and it was a bit of a Mills and Boom story because the nurse that was there was going out with my uncle, who was the intern, and she used to let me help them at night duty. And I thought, oh God, I'm good at this. I'm good at helping out here, giving out the water. And I kind of like what they're doing here, helping out all of these people. So I was a bit of a helper. I liked seeing smiles on people's faces. I love people. I love talking to people. And I thought, no, I'll be a nurse. And do you know what I thought? I'll be able to do that. It doesn't require a lot of spelling or writing. So there was a bit of that natural ick. So when I shared when I came out of hospital that I was going to be a nurse, that was it. My family decided, and everyone around me, I was going to be a nurse. So that was more or less my decision then. So I often think of that because there was so much more that interested me as well. But I do believe I did like to see people, I did like to see that making a difference piece that I do think that and it's Breed, my now aunt, she was fabulous, warm, compassionate. And I just did think, I'd like to be like that. I'd like to do something like that. So there was that piece that was there. There was a little curry whibble with that, though. When I did get my Leaving Cert results, everybody was bowled over that I had done as well as I had done. And I actually got a place to do science in NUIG at the time, or Galway, or whatever it's called now. It's changed its labels a few times. But I remember the conversation at home was, well, you always wanted to be a nurse. So I was kind of, and probably myself, discouraged. And again, the dyslexia piece, the piece of how difficult it was for me to, to constantly write was
But
there.
those difficulties would have also been an issue, presumably, as a student nurse.
Oh yeah, they were. They were. They were. But you see, I worked hard. I worked really, really hard at everything I did. So I actually was very good at the knowledge part. And I can say this now because I've developed all this. I would never have said that 20 years ago. I would never say I was good. But now I really can look back and say, I was kind of, I always read. I loved reading. Once I turned that corner and was able to read, I loved reading. And when I read really slowly. So everything went in. I needed to understand everything. So I have a certain way. So there's a gift of dyslexia, to be quite honest. And it's that, constant attention to detail that I have. So, Now, the problem was I used to have to write, and there was a lot of spelling mistakes. And I remember through my education in Jervis Street at the time, my principal tutor constantly marking me down because I'd have wrong spellings. But actually, my final exam, I got a first. Back then you got honours, and I think I was number 2 in the whole country of the marks at that time, something like that, in terms of you were graded. So I got an honours. Not that it made any difference, and never did in terms of your CV or your career, but for me, again, that was another validation of
Huge achievement.
Yeah, and it was the knowledge I had. Again, I must have managed the spelling on the day. It was. Yeah, it was. So it would have been. But I suppose the way you learn as a nurse, and still the way you learn as a nurse, and now that I'm a nurse educator, I've been passionate about this, is when you're learning about what you're doing, I call it, and I did my thesis on this, cognitive apprenticeship. You're thinking and you're doing is coming together, and then it's easier to put it on paper because you know what you're doing and you can talk about what you're doing. And now, thankfully, we've got lots of different assistive things that can help people write. But I kind of wonder about that, because I do think that as a dyslexic, you can learn how to write and read very well. You're just going to be slower at doing those things. But slower is not bad. Slower is meticulous. Slower is what's needed in healthcare.
So back to your nursing career, you became interested in critical care. Why critical care?
Well, I think it was that knowledge-based piece that I loved. I loved figuring things out. I loved sort of diagnosing things. Not that I'm saying critical care nurses do that, but they do operate at that level where they take in a lot of information and, diagnose what is going on, and that continuous assessment and that immediate interventions and that kind of higher order thinking that they need to do fairly quickly. So I was very interested when I moved to the States, and I have to say there was so much career opportunities there, and whatever area you wanted to work in, you could. So I worked in a thoracic vascular unit, and there was an opportunity to do that kind of advanced assessment with patients and make do some more kind of immediate interventions, the people who had lung surgery, etc. So that what I thought was, no, I'd like to do the next level of education and training and work in a critical care unit, and I did. And again, I was trained so well. I look back on the wonderful teachers. I didn't say that, by the way. Sister Gemma before this was that wonderful nun who actually diagnosed me with dyslexia. There's people along your way that encourage you and that give you that, say you can do it. So there was also a clinical nurse manager there who was, yeah, I know you'd be really good at this. I'll put a good word in for you. You're really sure. But I'd say it now, you're sharp, you're quick, you can manage things, you manage emergencies well. So I did go to critical care, and I absolutely loved that nursing. I loved the one-on-one care I could give someone and their families. I loved that autonomy. I loved working closely with the other disciplines. I loved working with the doctors. I loved working with the physios. I loved that interdisciplinary work, and what was very much over there and possibly and here, yes, in those type of units, you were one team, and each person was respected completely and entirely in that team for their particular knowledge and specialty and their skill set. So that's what I experienced, and I loved that work. I really
Love
did.
is such a strong word for like all of your career. And I'm wondering then, you loved the work. Then what made you decide to go and take the chance on becoming a charge nurse when that might have taken you away a little bit from the work?
Yeah, I suppose in again, I was working in the States at the time, and they were always about you moving to your next level and encouraging you, and have this one yearly performance appraisals, which didn't happen once I returned back to these shores. And I found those fabulous as a young person, a young woman. You were told how great you were, and everybody was, and then where you could improve on and where your potential was, and they were always looking to see what you could do next. So I was encouraged to go and be the charge nurse, or the same as a nurse manager here, and I just thought, yeah, I can do that.
And did you have any doubts?
No, it
Did
was
you
a
not?
16-bedded unit. No, I don't think so. I think youth is a great thing. No, and it was the culture that was there, and my colleagues as well that I worked with. There was a lot of really senior nurses there at the time. They didn't want that job because they had children at the time, and they didn't want that job. But they had no difficulty with a young whippersnapper. Not that I was that young, but there was nurses in their 40s and 50s delighted that I was the manager, which I think might be a little bit culturally different here. They were, so yeah, and I knew I had there was a great team there. I liked the unit I worked in. And
Did you have to develop a whole new skill set in order to be effective as a manager?
yeah, well, you did. You kind of that prioritization too, because you had to know who you was going to be discharged out to make beds for who needed to be to come in. Then you needed to know how many staff were needed for if a patient deteriorated, you might need to put two staff on. You needed to that kind of managerial stuff. You needed to do the shift. You needed to plan all of your shifts. Um, yeah, those and they even had technology back then that still isn't here in the HSE. I hate to say,
Mm.
um, but where you had a shift grid, like you just put the name in, and then a computer spat out this. You put in your skill set and all of that. So that was useful. I had a secretary as well. Um, so there was good support. In fairness, there was really good support for that. There was also a clinical nurse specialist there at the time, who would support me in terms of training and induction and preceptorship and all of those things. Yeah, there was really excellent support, Lily, is what I would
Mm.
say. You weren't you were eased in, but I don't know. Again, if, as I said, it was in Boston, and there was kind of a thing of you're well able. Again, a bit like my mother. The culture was you can do this. There wasn't like, oh, you're only qualified X, or
Mm.
there was a very much you can do
And I'm
this.
wondering, some of our listeners are managers and leaders in
Mm,
the HSE and other public service
mm.
bodies. What would you say to them about supporting young women in their careers?
Oh, I'm a real advocate of supporting young women. It really irritates me when people think there's a time need for leadership.
Mm.
Some people, because they want to, because they're motivated, because of their life's experiences or their education, just simple motivation, they are wonderful leaders. And if that's, in terms of young people, I hate to hear people say, oh, I mean, she's just fresh out. And I think we say it an awful lot. I think promote young women. They've got energy. They mightn't know it all, but they can learn it. Steep learning curves are the best way to learn. From my own experience of life, there is nobody that would be thinking that I was going to be the best at different things I've done until I do them. And so I do think, giving young women, give them a chance. Don't, look, when you look at a CV, it doesn't have to be the person with all they they experience. Sometimes they want something different than grafting at managerial level. And managerial level is particularly middle management is a difficult place to be. Even there's a senior management, there's different types of metrics that need to be achieved, and you have to bring those down, and you have to motivate your staff to be enrolled in meeting those metrics, and you're the cold face of that, and so you're squeezed in between. It's a difficult place to be, and sometimes I do think young women have sometimes the resilience and the energy, and maybe the charisma sometimes to do that. And charisma has a lot to do with
And the lack of
management
fear, maybe.
and the lack of fear. And when you say that
Mm.
to me, yeah, when I took on that 16-bedded unit, was I fearful? No, I was delighted with the challenge. I was thinking, oh yeah.
Mhm.
Whereas, maybe at a different stage in my life, I'd be, no, maybe I'll take a different type of challenge. So I do
Mm.
think young women, they don't need a decade in some place. They become socialized into what's already there. I think promote people, give people opportunities to flourish and to excel, and to lead people who are already in the organization. And they love that. And then the energy you get back from young people is great.
You also mentioned that feedback that you were getting as a young person,
Mm,
every year.
mm.
What would you advise the HSE in relation to that?
Oh, that's an essential thing. I know there's IR issues around performance appraisal, and it seems to not happen. And it does happen. I know it formally kind of happens and whatever. I suppose the American model is a very business model, so the performance, your metrics, what you had to achieve the following year. But I found those wonderful as a young in my early career to be told, because you wouldn't know what you're doing wonderfully well. And, and it just did give you that motivation, giving you opportunity too, saying, okay, this is where we'd like to see you and this is what we can do for you to get there. And I would advise that even if it's not in place, I think you need to meet your staff. You need to tell them what they're doing well. You need to ask them first. You need to get them to self-assess. What do you think you're doing well and what do you think you need to improve on? And oftentimes with women, you might need to tell them, no, actually, you don't need to improve on that. You're just very hard on yourself. There's an awful lot of women that really judge themselves, really severe on themselves. And I do think it's important. And then there's some people without insight. I don't mean to be, that don't have that level of self-reflection, and they often need a little bit of more direct, these are the areas that I would like you to see some movement on, and this is what we could do for you.
Okay, so just to return to your career path, if we might, you came back to Ireland and worked in intensive care here. And then it seems like you started on this whole education journey. Do you want to say something about what brought you back? Why you started on the career journey or the education journey, rather?
Well, I don't think I'd have ever come back, or as quick as coming back. Only I did lose a child in America, and I decided to come back to Ireland to be near family and that. So that's what brought me back to Sligo. I don't think I'd have ever come back to Sligo, at that point, because I was busy about. I suppose I had ambition. I was an ambitious person, and. So and I was delighted to get the job here, and to get back to Sligo, my home, with my family, who were very important to me, my mother and father, and extended family and brothers and sisters and friends, my school friends. So this was home, and it was where I needed to heal, but I haven't moved off since. So I was in Sligo University Hospital, as it's known now, and I got my job in intensive care there, and I enjoyed my time there. But there was a little bit of me wanted to be, using the skills I had gained. And so I did go actually for the nurse manager's position, and I didn't get it. But I put myself out there to do that, and I also used to train up new inductees when I was in the States as well. That was on my CV. So the director of nursing there, I think maybe because I applied for the manager's position, and because I took a huge interest in the students who came, decided I was really lucky. And while there was some criticism of the director at the time, she said there was a place in the school, and I then remember I asked the principal tutor that was there, how would I go away and get educated to be a nurse tutor? Because I always had in the back of my mind when I was training that I'd love to do the job of the people who were teaching me. This is quite superior. I might do it differently. But no, and some of them were fabulous. But anyway, that's what I had thought. So that was always there for me. I'd love to teach. But back in Sligo, and now I had another child. Doing this may not be possible, but I was beginning to ask, could I go up to the UK? Could I go to the north to do the education, etc.? So, and I asked the director of nursing, and then a place came up, a temporary place in the school, and she placed me there. So I think the moral of the story for all those young women who are listening, put yourself out there, ask the questions. Even if you haven't a chance of getting that job, sit for the interview. Because then people get to know who you are and how motivated you are. Ask the questions. Ask how I can get educated. Don't take it that you deserve it. How is it I can get the qualifications to do that job? So I think that might have worked.
I hear as well, don't be afraid to be ambitious and to have a vision of who you might be in the future.
That's the big thing. I think it is. And I have to say the gift of dyslexia and the gift of maybe not been, always been the last on this in the spelling test or whatever, was that internal, that it did it for me was, oh, I can do it. I just need to ask, or I need to work. And I also would advise people that, yeah, you can do it, and don't be afraid to have the ambition, and you can get there. And all it might take. Let's be realistic. You may not have the skill set. It might take you longer. You may not come. You may not have the network, but you need to build it, and that does require a little bit of that confidence of, yes, I can do it.
Yeah, I'm struck, Idel, that all of this was happening against a background where you'd suffered a tragedy, you'd moved home. It takes quite a bit of resilience, doesn't it? I almost hate the word resilience now, but it takes something personally to be able to overcome all of that and still hold true to your ambition and your passion, and take those kind of necessary steps to bring you to where you want to go. So I'm wondering, what was that in you?
Well, I think for me, when things happen, if you get joy out of what you do in your work, it's part of your identity that you get something back that's still there for you. So for me, my work, and it's always been, is part of who I am. It's part of who I meet. If I can contribute to that, if I can make something better, and I don't, but I'm listening to myself, and there's a lot of things I really mess up, but I feel I'm doing something. And the people you meet, as well, and that job satisfaction, and that to get up in the morning too. I think that was important for me, to get up in the morning, to have purpose. And sometimes, and I have purpose around family too, by the way, and I have 4 children, fabulous children now, and a husband. So I have huge purpose there. But for me, that wasn't always just who I was. I always felt I had more to give to the world and absolutely being a mother and a daughter and all those is enough already as well. But for me, that wasn't just my purpose. I might be a bit greedy. I want it all.
Okay, so you went on and you did train to be a tutor, and that wasn't enough either. You wanted to do more. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so I did. I did do my. I went back, and I had 2 small babies, and I did my degree in Trinity, and then I did my master's in UCD, and I did
All
some.
of which, we should say, meant you were travelling up and down to Dublin,
Yes.
as well as working full time.
Yes, that's
Yes.
right. And now I will add that I worked with a very supportive team in the School of Nursing at the time. Oh my God, those women were just amazing, and men actually. Yeah, they're amazingly supportive to me, and I did get 1 day study leave to go up and down, and I drove up and down in the 1 day. For my master's, for my degree, I was actually able to take the train early, the 6 a.m. train. Sometimes I could drive to Longford, and because there was no connection at that time, and drive up and down. My biggest thing was to be away from the children as little as possible. So, and my classes were in the evening, so I would be home at maybe 2 o'clock in the morning from my master's studies. Yeah, I'll lump it all in together. I remember getting the Trinity details of Student Sports Centre and the socks, and I was thinking, oh, wouldn't I have loved to do that back then when I wasn't studying part-time? But yeah, I did that, and I met some fabulous colleagues as well who were doing the same as me, and we had a lovely network of people. Louise, I'm thinking of Gallagher, sending me. She was single at the time, and she had no children, and she'd be helping me by sending me articles and things like that. And I hope I helped her out too. But we had a lovely network, peer support network of people helping us study part-time as well. That was really important for me.
So common. And then
Yeah.
in terms of support around managing the family?
Oh yeah, well you see, this is why
Mm.
I'm in Sligo with my fabulous parents and my fabulous family. Yeah, I have to say my mother and father were hugely supportive, and my childminder, Madeline McLaughlin, was just, I had the most fabulous childminder ever, who took care of my children and who went the extra mile for me. You know, if she had to hold on to the children for a little time. I, unfortunately, during that time, separated and divorced. I think actually, I think I was only 6 months into my degree when that happened. So I was on my own with the with children a lot. So I could not have done all those things without my childminder, my mother and father, and some other, my sisters. Yeah. So my friends, I'm looking at one of them. I have to say, yeah, you have to have a network of people you trust, or you can't do it.
Such a common theme, actually, in my discussions with women is the support that. But I also think you have to be able to ask for support, don't you?
Mm, mm.
What enabled you to do that?
Yeah, you have to be able to not think you're the only person that can actually do everything for your children. You know, and my children, and we could have them sitting here on the screen chair, and I'll ask them, but I have asked them because I have a 29-year-old now and a 26-year-old, and they were the two that suffered the first tranche of
Mm.
studies, and they don't have an issue. They do feel I was there. When you are there, you have to be fully there, fully present. So when you're with your children and making sure you oversee what's happening, but you also have to trust other people, and you have to really be able to allow other people to care for them and stay in touch with that. So there's a little bit, if you do have a career, you have to be able to let go, because otherwise, you have to trust. You have to trust even later on. I didn't have at the time, but I always used to say I got a cleaner, and she was the greatest gift that could be given to me ever. But again, so you have to begin, as women particularly, you have to look to see who's out there that can support you to do the things that you don't have to do, and to be available for the things you do have to do, because you have to have time to be able to sit, listen with your children, see how they're getting on with their education, their health, the times they need you, quality times you need to spend with them. So I feel, I hope, that I had that time, but you have to be able to let go.
Mm. And speaking of your career, so
Mm.
career, it just sounds so clear for you that this was a career trajectory, and your next trajectory was towards college and being a lecturer first and foremost, and then the head of school of nursing and health science and disability.
Yes, so so yeah, when I moved from the School of Nursing, you had to have your masters, and very quickly I wanted to have my doctorate, and I wanted to do research, because that's what I thought would, yeah, I have to remember that we were the very first degree. It was the very 2002 was the first degree in nursing in Ireland, right, for all undergraduates. So I was one of those lecturers. There's so many of us there that brought nursing from its apprenticeship into the university. So we were very passionate, and so I wanted to do the research and all of that sort of stuff. So yeah, I moved. I wanted to do it, but you see, then I fell in love again. And that's what my whole life, actually, where I went to in Boston, because it was for love interest reasons, for back, all was to do with circumstances, my own personal circumstances. So I fell in love again, and I got married again, and I had two more children. So that kind of stopped it a little bit for a while. And then when my youngest was 3, I was like, no, I need to do this now. So I then studied to do my doctorate of education, and I then when I had that done and a bit of research done on that, and did some international travel, projects on that, and also became the chair of the union during that time, because there was a bit of a problem with the contracts, and I was sitting looking and thinking, and then I thought, no, I put my name forward to get this sorted. Me and several other very powerful women at the time. So that kept me interested in terms of leadership there. And then an opportunity arose to be there was a vacant position for the head of school on a temporary basis. So I jumped up for that. And then, because I think it was always there that I'd like a leadership role, and then 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 it became advertised on a permanent position, and I took.
And again, that was a big change, wasn't it? So again, it was moving from front-facing, teaching, lecturing, to managing people. In particular, I know that's hugely challenging for a lot of women. Was it challenging for you?
As a lecturer, we had different management roles as program directors, etc. So, and I had been sort of a manager before, but so I thought it would be easy peasy because I had already managed courses and managed different parts and issues. But yeah, it was. Yeah, I have to say, it's a very different animal being one of the team and having a certain view of what's going on and a notion of how things should be done, and then actually being in that position. Yeah, to be quite honest. And I think in terms of preparing managers, I think it's really important that they understand that. And, it can be very difficult because you become, by nature of the things you have to do, you may become quite, you may be unpopular at times. Whereas when you're part of the team, you don't have to make any of those difficult decisions. And sometimes the decisions aren't of your making. They're just the rules of engagement. They're the budget. They're the what has to happen. And to make those decisions.
If you could give advice now to people, in more senior leadership positions, even putting somebody for the first time into a management role, what would you advise? How could they be supported better?
Well, I do think they need a mentor. I do think they need a mentor in the organization, possibly, or outside the organization. Outside the organization is really useful. I did have a mentor outside the organization, to be, to coach you on how you're responding. Sometimes you might respond too emotionally, to things, and you need to step back. You need to not answer that email. You need to sit on that email for a while. You maybe need to have a conversation rather than sending an email. Things like that. You have to remember where you are coming from. You have to try and step back into objectivity. And I think it's useful to have some kind of, particularly at the beginning, some kind of coach, mentor on that, to see the pitfalls that you keep falling into. I think in the organization, you also need you need support. You do need check-in and support in the organization, particularly if you're a new manager, and some peer support from other managers of the same level. And I think I've built that as well, I have to say, because you now need to be part of another team. Sometimes I think managers are left very lonely in their own little place, where they listen to all the problems from their team. That's what they have to do, everything, what's going on. But their team member wouldn't be interested in that's management, your management. So, so you need to have some peer support. You need to belong. Yeah, that whole belonging. You now, when you move to management, need to belong to another place where you can share similar how to get over issues, particularly the institutional knowledge that another manager might have that might be able to share with you. So peer support and senior management support.
And you then took an even bigger step up. So speaking of being in a management role, and then you were acting director of the college for a long time. So I suspect that introduced you to a whole new level of thinking and understanding of organisation, politics, etc.
Well, it did. Not for a long time now, Lily.
No.
The president in the college went on maternity leave, so that a particularly important time because we were incorporating into the Atlantic Technological University at the time. So there was an awful lot going on there. So I suppose it wasn't actually a job I applied for in the first instance, to be honest, because I kind of belonged in my nursing discipline world and I would have seen myself moving on. And I often looked at the Department of Health and other places to think, well, would I like something there in a leadership way in terms of healthcare? So that kind of was my passion. But I also have a huge interest in politics and in regional politics and in bettering the region. So, and that'd be the kitchen table stuff at home. That was always there. So, and in my own personal life. So when the mat leave was there, I thought, oh no, and I had been on the board at the time. I knew I was part of the senior management team in St. Angela's. So, and the president at the time was very supportive of me going for that role. So I did move into that role, and I have to say, I loved it. I learned so much. It was such an important time in terms of setting up the legal agreements and trying to negotiate, with the department. We were doing a U-turn from a different university to that university. So there was a lot of negotiation. I suppose I had learned a lot of negotiation skills from my time as chair of the union. So all these things, it's like your life. I didn't plan it. I had no intention of going there, none of that trajectory. So it's like it comes into your space. And then all of these transferable skills that you've got from maybe even working in charities or wherever your background is, you'll bring those with you. And particularly as women, because we're always involved in things, you bring those in then to your. So I found that fascinating how other skill sets then helped me with that job. And I got to see a whole new level of dealing with the departments, the civil servants in the departments, the politicians, in terms of, navigating a change in plan, legal agreements, the law people, and just, that I find that fascinating. And people are very much the same in every world. And I think nursing was a wonderful background for me because, the thing of what a nurse does is if you don't know it, you look it up. And I found that before any meeting, I was prepared. I'd find out who that was, what did that mean? Anything that I didn't know, I came back and looked it up and to find out so that I know what I was talking about. There was so much I didn't know, but I did know what we needed to do. So I kind of had the end goal in mind. So learning curve, exciting, lots of support from lots of people as well, a lot of encouragement at that time. Yeah. It was
So from the dyslexic little girl in Ransborough National School to your current position, I can't even imagine where the future might be, although I suspect you have a few little plans. But looking back, are you proud of who you've become?
Yes, I am. I'm very proud. I better say it's the Mercy Convent I went first, and then the little national school in Ransborough, and then the Ursuline Convent. I did a tour of Sligo schools. Yes, I am. Yeah, I know. Again, it's something I wouldn't have done a decade even ago. To say, one of my proudest moments was my doctorate in education. I have to say the personal achievement of that for me was a personal achievement from the girl who had dyslexia, without a doubt. But even looking at my career trajectory, if I wasn't to do another thing, I'm absolutely content and completely fulfilled with where I'm at. So while I may have plans and I want to be wrung out before I die, yeah, I am extremely content and fulfilled and blessed to have had the opportunities I've had. And I know this is a short interview. I could talk about hundreds of people who have really helped me along the way. But all I would say is if you put it out there, if you tell a few people, if you say what you want, if you put yourself up if you fail. I'm very good at failing. You see, that's another
Mm.
gift of dyslexia. If, you know, you can get there. So, I am totally content with where I'm at if nothing else happens.
And so that advice for young women in the public service who are listening to you is, number one, put yourself out there. Anything else?
Um, Look for support, find some critical friends. Of course, they need to be able to listen to you until you get it all out. And then you need that critical friend to say, well, now what if you did this? And what if you did that? Try and create your networks. Try and talk to people. Try and get those critical friends. Um, and
And one
yeah,
thing that you said in our pre-talk was help other women.
I'm a bit passionate about that. That I just see women are particularly judgmental. They criticize too much and they don't try and promote each other. They need to like actually say, "Oh, I want to help that woman." Help each other. And I think it's coming out a little bit more, but that's my big advice is look to each other, look to your female colleague and see how you can help them and tell them you can do this. You should go for that. You should go for the other. I hope I've done that and I hope more of my colleagues believe in women.
Looking back, you could be remembered for something in terms of particularly nurse education, which is the thing I know you're most passionate amongst your many passions. What would you like to be remembered for?
I might like to remember for being motivating, maybe. Just being believing in people, even my students. I see some of my students now and they're directors of nursing, and I go,
Mm.
wow. And they wouldn't have been the A students. So I would like that, as a lecturer, I would like to be remembered as well that I might have tried to be strategic, that I would have listened to people.
I've also heard you say a lot that you'd like to impact the quality of care.
Well, my biggest thing, yeah, and I'm very bad really when I'm teaching. I I have to say, I'm always highlighting what can be done better. What I really want all nurses to have is autonomy, but responsibility. That they're actually where the buck ends. Isn't another book. That's what they do today is that accountability. I suppose I would have spent a lot of my career trying to build the skills of nursing, like physical assessment, brought that in about 20 years ago. I would like to be remembered that I was trying to advance the skill set of the nurse and the ability of the nurse to be able to do more interventions.
So, Dr. Idel McSharry, this has been an inspiring conversation. I have no doubt that some of our listeners will be inspired to take a brave next step in following their own career passions and intuitions. And I hope some people will also be inspired to support the women in their lives through all of the various ways that you've mentioned, to also, be proud of their ambition and to follow their passion. Thank you for being our guest today here on The Next Step. And I'd like to thank all of the team here on Her Next Step for making this possible.
I just want to say thank you to you, Lily, because I know that you are passionate about women in leadership and that you have given your whole life to that. And I think there couldn't be another better person to do this type of podcast. To help other people. You're actually quite inspiring yourself, and you have been an absolute one of those support people to me. You're a wonderful coach.
If you've enjoyed today's show, do like and share the podcast. If you'd like to hear more interviews with smart, ambitious, passionate women in the public service, you can listen to us wherever you get your podcasts. We welcome positive feedback and suggestions for future guests you'd like to hear from. Meantime, goodbye from me, Lily Murphy, and all the team at Her Next Step. Remember to look for the stepping stone that will support your next step, or consider how you could be the stepping stone for somebody else.